John Harbaugh ripped the Baltimore Ravens penalties after their Week 15 win over the New York Giants. We talk about that. Lamar Jackson putting the NFL on notice again, and so much more coming up on this edition of Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Ostreicher of Ravens Wire, here with you on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for being here, making Locked On Ravens both a part of your day and your first listen each and every single day. We're free and available for you on all podcasting platforms. That includes in video form on YouTube, where you can like and subscribe to the channel. Also in audio form, where you can follow along over there. Hit that subscribe button, follow along button as well. It's the same show, both audio and video, so you're not missing out any which way you decide to watch or listen to our content. And we're a 5-day-a-week Ravens show, bringing you news, analysis, updates, and so much more on this Baltimore Ravens team. Today's episode of Locked On Ravens is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet. You're going to start with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Ravens pick up that big Week 15 win over the Giants. It's a nice little victory Monday here on Locked On Ravens. And again, I've mentioned it on a bonus show. I've mentioned it on a live show. I have to mention it here as well. We did hit 10,000 subscribers over on YouTube on Saturday. And that was the big milestone, at least the first of many big milestones that I was aiming to hit on the YouTube side of things. So I just wanted to mention it on an actual, Monday through Friday edition of the show. I can't express my gratitude for all the support I've gotten here, starting up in audio form in 2019, video form in 2021. And, we've been going strong here on Locked On Ravens. This is episode 1,401 consecutively. I've not missed an episode on the weekday since 2019, since I started this thing up. So I do have my little Wilt Chamberlain. I'll hold it up one more time. My Wilt Chamberlain 10,000 little sticky note here for those watching in video form. And for those listening in audio form, you can imagine Wilt holding up that 100 poster. That's what I was doing with that 10,000. So here's to the next 10,000. And thank you to all the everydayers out there who listen each and every day. If you're new to the channel, thank you for tuning in. And if you're somewhere in the middle, thank you for coming back and continuing to tune in to Locked On Ravens. Now, let's talk about John Harbaugh. First of all, ripping the Ravens penalties in that game against the New York Giants. We'll talk about Lamar putting the NFL on notice. We'll talk about the Ravens and Giants game overall and MVP talk, of course. But really wanted this first part of the show to talk about John Harbaugh ripping the Ravens penalties from this game. Because, look, you win a game 35-14, and you're thinking, oh, that's great. You win by 3 touchdowns, and there's a lot of good to take away, and there certainly was. But on the flip side of that, I think the big conversation point for a lot of people was there were still a bunch of penalties committed, a bunch of sloppiness was still there, even after the reset of the bye week. The Ravens came into this game as the most penalized team in the league, as well as them having the most penalty yards. I believe they also had the worst net count in terms of penalties for versus penalties against. And none of that changed on Sunday. 12 total penalties for 112 yards in this game. And in terms of actual stats, I have them right here. Through 14 games, 15 weeks, obviously now, the Ravens have had 117 penalties called against them for almost 1,000 yards, 997 yards, almost 1,000 yards. And their net count, again, that is for and against factored in, -33 net count in penalties. It is sloppy. It is inexcusable in a lot of different ways. And John Harbaugh, after the game, he was asked about the penalties. And especially, this was more of a defensive-oriented penalty question. Obviously, there was a false start here, and Linderbaum had one, and it was more of a defensive penalty question, though. And John Harbaugh really talked about, he said, quote, "The biggest thing was the pass interference calls. I don't know about the one late against Desmond King. I'll have to see that one. The other ones, we just have to get our head around quicker, play the ball sooner. One time we were playing the ball, but there was a grab. They called it tight. Those are tight calls, plays there in terms of pass interference. So we have to adjust. roughing the passer, you have to find a way to get off to the side. You have to find a way to do it. So we'll be drilling it. We'll be working on those. There's technique things that you just have to do a good job working on, because that's really, their drives were penalty inspired. If it wasn't for the penalties, those drives wouldn't have happened. So it's obviously something that's very important. Look, John Harbaugh clearly not pleased about the penalties here. He shouldn't be. And I know a lot of people kind of bring the penalties back to John Harbaugh in a way and say, the Ravens are an undisciplined team, and obviously it's on the coach to get his guys ready, this, that, and the other. We've had this conversation here on Locked On Ravens before. If you've been, an everyday, or you listen every day, or you've tuned into the show before, you know that we've had this conversation before. I think it's both. I think it does fall on John Harbaugh. I think he does have to have his team better equipped to play on game day in terms of them being ready. But John Harbaugh also isn't out there committing pass interference penalties or committing roughing the passer penalties, where it's a combination of both. I'm never really one, and if you listen to the show, you know this, I'm never really one to go out there and blame everything solely on one person, especially when it comes to sports, football. I think that there are multiple different factors. So when it comes to this, yes, John Harbaugh does deserve blame for not having his guys ready to play in that aspect. I mean, obviously they came out and they dominated in a lot of different aspects on Sunday against the Giants, but one of the aspects that a lot of people have been hoping would get better over the course of the season, this is not just this was a 12 penalty game and that was just, it was one game that this happened. No, we've been talking about this essentially week after week here. And if we want to do some quick math, we'll do a little quick math over here on Locked On Ravens, a little live. I'm doing this as I'm recording the show right now. We want to talk about penalties per game, just to average it all out. Look, for Baltimore, there's so much that they have done right this season. There's a lot they've done wrong too. But one of the things that is it's the self-inflicted stuff that we've been talking about, them getting in their own way. What John Harbaugh was talking about was, especially on that scoring drive, the first one where the Ravens walked the Giants down the field with 4 separate penalties. You can't be having that. So 117 penalties total. And then we're going to divide that by how many games the Ravens have played. Obviously, right now that is 14. You divide total penalties by total games. The Ravens are averaging 8.4 penalties per game. 8.4. That's too many. It's too many. They had a good penalty week before the bye against the Eagles, but then it somehow got worse against the Giants. And so I don't blame John Harbaugh for not being happy, although he does have a hand in this. But Nnamdi Madubuike, right, had the roughing the passer call. He's had a lot of those over the course of his career. Some justified, others not. But it's this fine line and fine balance, because some of those calls were weak, right? I'm not going to come out here and say that every single one of those calls was correct or clear and obvious. There were certainly some that I think could have gone the other way and not be called. But luckily for the Ravens in this game, if there is a silver lining in the penalty aspect, and really there's not, but I'm going to make one anyway. If there's a silver lining, it's that the refs couldn't impact the game. The penalties didn't impact the game because Baltimore dominated in so many different facets. But I don't disagree with John Harbaugh where he said the scoring drives wouldn't happen they wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for the penalties. Yes, I think so, especially on that first one. That was a clear example. You got the hands to the face from Oweh. Brandon Stephens is a whole other conversation, and we'll have this conversation throughout the rest of the show. We'll talk more Brandon Stephens as we get further and further in here. But long story short, Brandon Stephens still can't get his head around for the ball. He's still getting penalized. And you have guys out there like Nasty Nate Wiggins and Marlon Humphrey who are balling out. Trey White has certainly given the Ravens a lot more than I thought he was going to give them since coming over from the Rams. So a conversation I feel like has to be had about Brandon Stephens. And look, the Ravens have been pretty quick to make adjustments this season, whether it be Marcus Williams, Eddie Jackson, Trenton Simpson. I don't have the official snap counts in front of me, but he didn't really get a ton of run in this game until late, garbage time when the Ravens were resting their starters. So for Brandon Stephens, I don't think it's been all bad for Brandon Stephens this season. But compared to what he was in 2023, it's certainly been a big letdown, I'm sure, for him. Obviously, for people who watch this team, cover this team, it's been a letdown. Because we're talking about, go sign Brandon Stephens to an extension yesterday. He's going to demand so much money on the open market. Now here he is. getting penalized, continuing not to turn his head around for the ball, giving up big plays. This is a conversation now that almost goes into the territory of, do you platoon him? Do you cut his snaps? What do you do with Brandon Stevens? Because again, he gets matched up with number ones a lot here, and he was good at it last season, but it really hasn't been the same this year. So the Ravens have to figure out this penalty situation. I do think it's on the coaching staff, particularly John Harbaugh. I do think it's on the players, right? I think it's a two-way street when it comes to who deserves the blame for this. But at this point, whatever, right? People are going to get blamed for it. Just fix it. Just fix it. It's tough because sometimes you can't control it and you get called for something you didn't do, this, that, the other. But I didn't feel like the calls in this game, at least most of them, were egregiously bad. Like, you look at the replay and you're like, yeah, Adafiowe did hit that guy in the face. Or, yeah, there was a little grab on the pass interference. Or, maybe you go out there and other people maybe look at a penalty and say, oh, that's not a penalty. That's not a penalty. But even like the Nnamdi Madubuike play, right? Did he lift Tommy DeVito up and slam him into the ground? No. But you could certainly say, okay, there was their little body weight there. So Baltimore, when it comes to playing better teams, when it comes to playoffs, right, high leverage situations, I am a little nervous that there are going to be game-changing, maybe season playoff-defining penalties because the Ravens just can continue to not get out of their own way in that aspect. So John Harbaugh says they're going to show it up, they're going to coach it up, but I mean, I would have hoped they'd be doing that the entire season, and it still hasn't gotten better. Football, it's such a bang-bang thing, right? Like, if you let up on any situation, you try to be careful, you're going to give up a play. So you have to kind of trust your instincts and go through the motions at such a quick speed, but you have to be able to do that and also do the right thing and do everything right, or else it's going to hurt your team, it's going to hurt yourself, and that's the issue you don't want to run into. But Baltimore won this game handily, so it didn't matter in this one. And coming up in the second part of the show, we'll talk about Lamar Jackson putting the NFL on notice. Strong message on the field with his play, strong message off of it post-game. So be sure to stay tuned. Lots to get to on the show. First, this show is sponsored by BetterHelp. I have a lot of favorite parts of the holidays, and there are a lot of moments and things that make me happy during December, such as being around family, opening presents with everybody, and just being in everybody's presence. And how do you stay cozy during the winter months? For some, it's wrapping up in a blanket with a mug of hot chocolate or watching a movie with family. It can be the best way to spend the month of December, but therapy is a great way to bring yourself some comfort that never goes away, even when the season it changes. Therapy has so many benefits, from learning positive coping skills and how to set boundaries. It can also empower you to become the best version of yourself. And it isn't just for those that experience major trauma, it's for everyone. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist, and switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. Find comfort this December with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. And the show is brought to you by the College Football Playoff. It's that time of the year. The College Football Playoff is back, and with the newly expanded 12-team format, it's guaranteed to be bigger and better than ever, bringing you all the hard-hitting and high-flying excitement that you love. TNT Sports coverage of the College Football Playoff begins December 21st, starting with the College Football Playoff kickoff show presented by AT&T at 11 a.m. Eastern. Leading into our first matchup, the Southern Methodist University Mustangs battling the Penn State Nittany Lions at noon. Then the Clemson Tigers looked to upset the Texas Longhorns in a showdown at 4 p.m. Eastern. Don't miss a moment of the action. Watch the College Football Playoff presented by Allstate live on TNT, True TV, TBS, and Max. We're back our second segment, Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher still here with you on this Victory Monday edition of the show. Appreciate everybody again for being here, making Locked On Ravens a part of your day, your first listen each and every single day. And be sure to make your second listen the new look Locked On NFL. We're talking Ravens football here. Lamar Jackson and the Ravens defeat the New York Giants by the final score of 35-14. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button in video form on YouTube here on Locked On Ravens, and follow along and subscribe in audio form as well. Whether you decide to watch or listen, same show, both audio and video, so you're not missing out on any of our content. And we bring you that 5-day week plus more daily Ravens coverage. We go live after the games. Did that yesterday. We have so much coming your way through hopefully February with this Ravens team and beyond. We go off season 2. We are year round here on Locked On Ravens, and don't you forget it. But let's talk about Lamar Jackson putting the NFL on notice. Now, multiple different ways he did this against the Giants on Sunday, on the field, off the field. This was Lamar's world, and we were all just living in it. Obviously, on the field, Lamar was absolutely incredible in this one. He had more touchdowns than incompletions, 290 yards passing, 5 touchdowns, and was unbelievable. Really had full control of this game, it felt like, and 21-25, that also is really impressive. Didn't have to play for the majority of the fourth quarter, and that's another thing in itself where we'll dive into this really over the course of the week here, but with the Steelers coming up on Saturday, that's going to be your most physical game of the year, and you're not playing your guys in the fourth quarter. That's huge. It's added rest opportunity for a team in Baltimore that does have to play 3 games in an 11-day stretch, as we have talked about for a while here on Locked On Ravens. But, Lamar made a statement on the field. Obviously, we know the story about his mom cussing him out, saying, you got to take those lanes, run more, rush more when that opportunity presents itself. Lamar had 6 carries for 65 yards. On one of them, he was trying to hold his pants up because, he thought they were coming down. It was actually a very funny story that he told about that whole situation. If you haven't seen it, I put it out on Twitter and social media, so be sure to go check that out and look at what he had to say about it. It was actually a very funny thing. But, man, Lamar was incredible. But the thing that I want to talk about a little more than that, because, but we could talk about Lamar all day doing this, and we will. But I want to talk about what he said after the game, because last year it felt like there were so many, all right, this team is locked in type moments. And we haven't really, not that they're not locked in this season on a goal. I know it's been a little weird with the whole drama situations that have popped up and, different team, whatever. But I thought that Lamar, after this game against the Giants, showed that mindset and put it on full display. He was asked about, his performance, the Ravens' performance, what he thought about it. And he said, quote, "I feel like we did pretty good today, but first drive I fumbled, so I'm really ticked off about that." Lamar had a all-time game, another game with less incompletions than touchdowns, and ended up throwing 5 of them, another Jackson 5 game, which we all love here. But Lamar's focused on that first drive fumble. And by the way, on that first drive fumble, Zay Flowers, again, we talked about this on the post game. I don't know if he thought Lamar was going to go outside, but he just stopped blocking on the play. And it was his guy that came in and stripped Lamar Jackson. So Lamar's a player that is so locked into winning a Super Bowl. He wants to be perfect in every single aspect. And I truly believe that Lamar will not be happy with a performance of his unless he either doesn't throw an incompletion or the Ravens win a Super Bowl. And even then he might say, man, I didn't do this route well or that well or whatever it was. Lamar wants perfection. He's so competitive. And now that we're in the stretch run in December, it's go time for this team. The AFC North, it is within their grasp. They can still win it. And honestly, at this point, I expect them to. But even if they don't, the Ravens know they have a long path ahead of them if they want to achieve their goal and if they want to get to where they want to go. And part of that is being as perfect as he can. And no one's going to be perfect. But I feel like Lamar having this mindset, and this isn't new, right? Lamar didn't just wake up on Sunday and was like, oh yeah, I'm going to have it. No, Lamar's been this way. Lamar understands how important this is to the city of Baltimore, to his teammates, to, and that's the thing. Lamar is such an unselfish person where, of course, yeah, it's a big goal of his. He wants to win for him. And yes, obviously, but he wants to win badly for everybody around him. And that's what makes Lamar an absolutely incredible person alongside the football player that he is. He paid homage to Michael Vick because he and Michael Vick now are the only 6,000-yard rusher quarterbacks in the NFL. Said he wouldn't know where he would be without Michael Vick, and he was grateful that he's in that conversation. And talked about the Steelers game and said it's going to be another one of those AFC North games, divisional rival games, and you got to look ahead. It's one day at a time, one game at a time. But man, Lamar's going out there each and every week for the most part. Obviously, it hasn't been perfect for Lamar this year either, because again, nobody is. But it just feels like he unlocks level after level after level. And it's incredible because we asked ourselves last year, man, this is the best Lamar Jackson we've ever seen. When are we going to see a Lamar like this again? And here we are, even better, just 1 year later. And Lamar said he felt like he started off slow at the turnover. He was hot about that. And he mentioned the special teams. We'll talk about that in the final part of the show. Special teams was incredible. But again, he's giving credit to his guys. Was happy for Mark Andrews, Rashad Bateman, offensive line, just everywhere. And he just feels like this is the one that I like to talk about here too. This quote, he says, we have to go into every game with the same mentality from this day forward, right? He feels like that's where the team is right now. So I think the bye week, probably we talked about it. It was one of the best things that could happen. Justin Tucker even said the bye week was excruciating for him, but it's went perfect on the day with extra points. He didn't need to kick a field goal, 35. So 5 extra points for Justin Tucker. But the Ravens have a big opportunity here moving forward, and Lamar Jackson being a much more vocal leader and taking on more of that leadership role for the team this year, down the stretch, that could be a really big thing. Because when he's playing like he is right now, and when he's having these quotes and having that mindset, a team can rally around that, most definitely. But coming up in the final part of the show, we'll get into more of a general recap of the Ravens and Giants game and talk a little bit about the MVP conversation as well. Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen certainly running away in a two-man race with that award. So we should have stayed tuned. A lot to get to on Locked On Ravens. First, the show is brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5, get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get 100 in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats with live play and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. So for the Ravens and Giants game, if you had Rashad Bateman for 2 touchdowns, maybe you had Tez Walker anytime touchdown, you might have been living large over on FanDuel. Get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more. FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NFL. And the show is brought to you by DK Law Group. When you need a law firm, do you want the legal runaround, or would you rather have a no-nonsense approach? You get the latter with DK Law Group. DK Law Group is a Maryland-based law firm who is redefining the legal process with their modern approach. DK Law Group specializes in real estate law, estate planning, business law, and family law. They're tech savvy. They treat clients like family, and they focus on keeping your legal solutions simple. DK Law Group is a woman-led firm with Diana Khan at the helm. Diana has been called an unparalleled legal expert by some. One of the things I'll quickly notice with DK Law Group is their transparent pricing. They believe in clarity and costs and no one left in limbo. DK Law Group knows that speed is key. By leveraging technology, DK Law Group streamlines the process to serve you better and faster. Contact DK Law Group today at dklawmd.com. Locked On Alerts doesn't call today to schedule a free 30-minute consultation when you mention the tagline, Empowering Legacies. We are back. Our final segment, Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher still here with you on this Monday edition of the show. Appreciate everybody who was here today, making Locked On Ravens both a part of your day and your first listen. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button, video form and audio form as well. Plus, we have local sponsorship spots available on Locked On Ravens. So if you're interested in that, or you know somebody who's interested, put your people or their people in contact with my people, and we'll get things rolling over there. But let's talk Ravens football. Let's talk Ravens and Giants, 35-14. We talked about this on the live show as well in more detail. We're going to get into some detail here as well. But I thought the Ravens did a really good job on offense, at least, of feeling out the game. Lamar talked about, especially on that Tez Walker play, and apparently it's now, toe tap Tez or Tez toe tap, whatever Lamar called him. I think it's Tez toe tap now. Yeah, Tez toe tap is what Lamar called him. That play, he said that based off what they were showing on the film, and on defense, he thought that the deep part of the field was going to be open and that they caught them in that look, and they executed that. I thought it was a very well-called game from Todd Monken, and the Ravens were able to go out there and really, outside of the first quarter, maybe expected more there, and I get that. But from start to finish, I thought that Baltimore really was the more dominant team, and obviously the box score, the final score, all that reflects that. Baltimore went 9 of 11 on third down compared to the Giants 2 for 12. So they made high leverage plays. Baltimore did. The Giants not so much. Baltimore had over 200 more total yards than the Giants did, 445 compared to 236. Baltimore averaged 7.5 yards per play, Giants 3.9, the Ravens 9.8 yards per pass, Giants 4.5, Ravens 5.5 yards on the ground per rush. You got the Giants with 2.8. Giants are not good. The Giants are not a good football team. I'm not coming on here and trying to say, oh, wow, look, this Giants team is so good, and the Giants defense is awesome, and the offense is so many stars. I'm not saying that. But I think in terms of a statement game, just to say, hey, we beat up on the teams we're supposed to beat up on. That's a big thing because the Ravens haven't done that consistently over the course of the last however many years you want to go back. Even this season with the Raiders game, for example, or Cleveland, like all of that, those are games that, you should win, but you didn't win. So I think there was always some worry in the back of people's minds. I know there was a little bit in the back of mine that's like, yeah, they really should win this game, but how is this situation going to actually unfold when the clock is at all zeros and the game is over? So luckily the Ravens did dominate here. And look, you can now add this game on to Buffalo and Denver and Tampa. And now you got New York here as teams that you went out there and pretty much dominated from start to finish for the most part. And you look at this game, again, Rashad Bateman breaks out with 2 touchdowns. You love to see that for Rashad. First multi-touchdown game of his career. I mentioned Tez Walker, first catch, check. First touchdown, check. Mark Andrews gets in the end zone. Nelson Aguilar had a nice catch. Justice Hill got in there as well. I mean, man, they just felt like a well-oiled machine. And once they got going, you can't stop them. That seems to be the theme with this Ravens offense. On defense, Kyle Hamilton was blasting players. Roquan Smith was getting involved. Or Darius Washington, the Ravens caught an interception. We can all rejoice. Marlon Humphrey played well. Nate Wiggins was awesome, talking trash and shutting down Malik Neighbors. This was a good game for a lot of people defensively. I know Brandon Stevens will be the top of the conversation, but man, I thought that overall, and then special teams wise, Desmond King comes in as a punt returner, does his thing. Man, Rasheen Ali, like the Ravens, this was a really good special teams game. We mentioned Justin Tucker, perfect on the day, 5 for 5 with extra points. Jordan Stout got a couple of kickoffs in this game, which was interesting, but a lot of interesting trends for Baltimore in this one. Now, the MVP conversation is now down to Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen. There really is not a question in my mind of that. Look, I think that Josh Allen's a heck of a player. He has a lot of big statement wins this season, and I don't have the numbers from week 15 on. I just have them from week 14. But you look at what it actually is here, and through 13 games, again, week 14, I'll have that number or those stats tomorrow. But Lamar, higher completion percentage, passing yards, pass yards per attempt, pass yards per game, pass touchdowns, less interceptions, better passer rating, rush attempts, rush yards per attempt. The only things that Josh Allen has better in the stat category than Lamar is his record and the rushing touchdown category. Record does play a part. Seeding does play a part. Winning division does play a part. But the difference between 3 losses and 5 losses is not enough to discredit Lamar from this award, where Lamar had 5 passing touchdowns in this game. Lamar balled out. Yes, it was the Giants. Yes, the Bills put up almost 50 on Detroit, which that defense has a lot of injuries. But this is a much more complicated conversation than just, Josh Allen is the MVP and Lamar is. And I think that's where a lot of people are going with this. Lamar is still very much in this conversation. At least he should be. And again, doesn't really matter if he wins MVP. I mean, really, at the end of the day, no. I think everybody, myself included, Lamar included, would prefer a Super Bowl MVP to an MVP, just regular. But my big thing is when a guy deserves an award, I want that guy to get the award. And I feel like both guys deserve it, but that's the thing, right? Both guys do. I don't think there's a clear winner with 3 games left. So both players are awesome. My vote would still go towards Lamar. Josh Allen has a lot of big wins this season. Detroit, Kansas City. There's a lot, but you also have to factor in Lamar did beat down Josh Allen head-to-head. Now, Lamar and Josh Allen aren't going head-to-head against each other, but that's another thing you got to consider in that conversation as well. That's all I have for you here today, though, on Locked On Ravens. Thank you so much for tuning in to the show. Be sure on the way out, hit that like and subscribe button in video form. Follow along in audio form for 5 days a week, plus more of daily Ravens coverage. And again, thank you so much for 10,000 on YouTube. Coming up tomorrow, more Ravens content and coverage. So be sure to stay tuned for that. I'll see you right back here tomorrow on Locked On Ravens.